Hi everyone, I'm Craig Tashman, and I'm going to be showing you an introductory tutorial to LiquidText today. Now, LiquidText is designed to slip into your workflow easily as an improved PDF reader, but then be able to scale up to advanced document analysis tasks, right? So it has a low floor, but a high ceiling. So I'm going to show you a two-part tutorial. First, I'm going to go over the basics of the product using a more transactional inspired use case, and then I'm going to go into the more advanced capabilities using more of a litigation inspired use case. Whatever your practice area, please watch both because I'm going to be showing you complementary capabilities in the two different parts of the tutorial. All right, let's get started. This is the LiquidText home screen. Now, I'm doing this demo today on my iPad, but it works pretty much the same on your PC, Mac, or any other device that LiquidText runs on. Now, this tile over here represents a project. A project is not quite the same thing as a document. A project can hold documents, so a project could have, say, one document and a few highlights all the way to tens of thousands of documents and thousands of pages of notes. The way you create a new project is always the same. You do it by importing one or more documents. You can do that from the local file system. You can import a web page and it'll be flash converted into a PDF. And you can import images, and you can import from integrations like iManage. But in many cases, the easiest way to import is just drag and drop. So we're just going to bring up the Apple Files app here, and this of course works about the same as the Windows File Manager windows. And I'm going to take this simple merger agreement and I'm just going to drag it right in. All right, now we're in the LiquidText editor screen. Let me give you a tour. Over here on the left is the document sidebar, and over here is the document list. This is the list of all the documents in the current project. In this case, of course, there's just one. This is the document I'm working on right now. And over here on the right is what we call the workspace. The workspace is like a notebook where you can take notes, gather facts, build arguments, and so on. Now, if I need more space, I can minimize the document sidebar here. I can just click this little button and the sidebar shrinks right down. Then I can click here to see my documents or here to see my bookmarks. But in this case, I'm going to keep it expanded for right now at least. Now, after you first bring in a document, you might want to do standard PDF reader things like OCR, page rotations, and so on. And you can do all that just by going to the little three dots menu here. And you see we have OCR and we have the page editor. You can also access the page editor up here. And you see all of your pages. You can delete pages, insert pages, rotate them, extract them, and so on. Now let's get started. We go over to the table of contents here, and I see I'm going to want to come back here easily. So I'm just going to select this. And after I select it, you see this little pop-up menu appears with all different options for my selection. I'm going to click bookmark. And you see it adds a little bookmark icon. And I can go over here to outline, click and go back to my bookmark whenever I want. All right, let's go on. Now, as I read the first page, I see this section here looks a little bit unclear. I'd like to indicate that. Now, in a typical PDF reader, I would highlight this, but I want to do more than just highlight it. I want to remember what that highlight means. So I'm going to go to tags. I'm going to make my first tag and I'll say unclear. I'm going to change it to a brighter color. I'll make it yellow and add it. And see, there we are. We just created a new tag. Now, let me go on here. Let's make another one. Let's say over here, I see a clause that we definitely can't accept. So I'm going to select, click tags, and you see my unclear tag is right there if I want it. Instead, I'll go to more and I'll say can't accept. Again, we'll go to a brighter color here and add. And you see, it just created a tag for can't accept as well. Now, we're going to need these tags in a few minutes, so I'm just going to go on and apply a couple of tags here. So we select the text, go to tags, and you see how fast that is? I can really quickly, really easily start tagging things as I go through my text. And we'll just add a couple more for a little later when we need them. There we are. Okay. Now, if you happen to be using a touchscreen device, LiquidText, of course, supports standard ink-based annotation. So I can click the little pen icon here. And if I click it again, I can control the color, pen width, and all those nice things. And then I can, for example, circle things, draw arrows, and all the standard ink annotation you would expect. But in many cases, I'm going to want more structured ways of annotating. For example, let's say over here they misspelled the name of our company. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to click on comment, and I'll say misspelled company name. And you see LiquidText just created a little comment. Unlike other PDF editors, it doesn't become a sort of useless bubble, but it actually stays large enough to read attached to the edge of your document. It's also smart. If I have a lot of comments on this page, it'll reposition them and resize them a little bit to try to prevent them from overlapping, so I can see them all at once. All right. Now over here, I think they may be violating SEC rules. I want a faster way to make a comment on that though. So I'm going to select the text, and instead of clicking the comment button, I'm not going to click the comment button. Instead, if I have a hardware keyboard, I'm just going to start typing. And you see, as soon as I start typing, LiquidText brings up this context-sensitive dialog box with all different options. I have options for applying a tag, doing a search, but the first option is adding a comment. So I simply press return, and there we are. It added my comment instantly. See, it's such a great, fast way to add comments on your documents. We'll add a couple more because we're going to need them a little bit later. Over here, I'll say needs review, enter, there we are, and we'll just add one more. Wrong class of stock, enter, and there we have it. All right. Now, as I go on, I see they keep referring to the closing documents, but I want to make sure they're referring to the right ones, so I want to do a search. Now, we have our search button right here. You can just click, and you see we can search the document, workspaces, current, or all. But there's actually a faster way to do a search. I can just start typing again, and I'll say closing documents. And again, as soon as I start typing, it brings up that context-sensitive dialog box, and the first option is do a search. So just press return, and there we are. It found 9 results. A lot of apps will give you a list of your search results, but they kind of take them out of context. But LiquidText is great about helping you see things with context. So I can actually squeeze my document to bring all of my search results together with just as much context as I need. Now, if I'm doing this on a touch screen, I can simply literally pinch my fingers against the screen to do this. If I'm doing this on a traditional mouse and keyboard device, I simply hold Shift while scrolling the mouse wheel. Okay, now let's look a little bit more at this one here. Yeah, I think they may be missing some. So I'll just select the text, and I'll say review closing docs. Press enter, and there we are. We added a comment. When I'm done with search mode, I can just click the X or click the search button again. We'll click the X, and now we're back in reading mode again. Okay, so as I continue on, I see paragraph S here. Seems like it's removing some of the protections that were given to me a few pages back. I'd really like to compare page 24 with one of the earlier pages. Normally that's a little tricky to do with a PDF, but with LiquidText it's easy. I can just squeeze the document like this, you see, to bring the 2 different pages together. Let me show you that again. I can just squeeze the document like this to bring the 2 different pages together. Now, if I'm using a touch screen, again, I can physically pinch my fingers against the screen. On a traditional mouse and keyboard device, it's just Shift and scroll the mouse wheel. All right, now looking at these 2 together, I think that yes, paragraph S does remove some of those protections. I want to note that, so I'll make a little reminder for myself. I'll say conflict, and I want to indicate where that conflict points to though. So watch this. I can literally use my pen or my mouse to draw a line from the first page over to the second page. And look at that, LiquidText has created a living line, a dynamic line. We call it an ink link. And it's much more than just a visual thing. It's an actual hyperlink. So I'll click here to uncollapse the pages. Just press and hold for a moment, and the document squeezes back together so I can see both areas at once. Again, I'll click here to uncollapse, and then just press and hold on this for a moment, and it squeezes back together so I can see both pages at once. So now you can easily capture relationships, conflicts, and so on between different pages of your document. All right, so at this point, I've had quite a few objections and concerns about this draft. I want to see an overview of them. So I can use a feature called HighlightView. First, I'll uncollapse the document again, and I'm just going to click on HighlightView here. Now, I'm again going to squeeze the document together, and you see all of my highlights, tags, and comments all come together. It works the same way that Find does. So I can zoom in where I want more context, zoom out to get back to that wonderful overview. It's a uniquely powerful way to see the most important information for you all at once. And again, if you're using a touch screen, you can physically pinch your fingers against the screen. On a traditional mouse and keyboard device, it's just Shift and scroll the mouse wheel. So up to now, we've basically been using LiquidText as a kind of PDF reader with superpowers. But let's go one step further. Now I'd like to start organizing my notes and writing up some of my big picture concerns here in the workspace. So the first thing I want to do is make a title heading here. I'll go over and click this little button. This is your text box button. And I'll draw a text box. And I'll say, many unacceptable clauses. I'd like to take my comments about those clauses and bring them over here into the workspace. So watch this. I can just take and drag my comments right off and bring them in to the workspace. We'll do that with a few of them. We'll take out the point about violating the SEC rules. We'll take out the point about the wrong class of stock and the point about the closing documents, and we'll bring all those together. And now you see, we now have these in the workspace. We can organize them by party, we can organize them by priority, whatever we need, put them under different title headings and so on. Now you say this is great, but now I don't remember what these comments pertain to. Well, this is one of the nice things about LiquidText. All these comments are linked back to their original sources. Let me show you. First, I'll turn off HighlightView here. And now, you notice each of these comments has a little white arrow. That white arrow is your magic home button. Wherever you are, just click it, and LiquidText will take you right to the source. See, you're never more than one tap away from the context of your notes. All right. Now, there were also several areas that were unclear. I'd like to indicate that as well. So I'm also going to make another title heading here, and I'll say several unclear areas. But I'd like to find those unclear areas. Well, that's really easy. I can just do a search for my tag, unclear. And it found 4 results. So it's finding now not only the word unclear in the text of the document, but also anything with that tag. So if I pinch together, you see, I see all the text that I tagged as being unclear. All right. Now, this area in particular is concerning to me. I'd like to actually link this one to my notes. How do I do that? Well, you saw before how we can connect different pages together by drawing a line. The same concept works here as well. So again, make sure you're in pen mode and use your pen or your mouse to just draw a line from your document into your notes. And look at that. It creates one of those wonderful ink links again. And the concept is the same. Wherever I am, whatever page I'm on, I can click this link and instantly get right back to what it points to. If you prefer to handwrite, you can also just write directly in the workspace and then directly connect things in the exact same way, right? So the idea works either way, just depending on whether you prefer to handwrite or whether you prefer to type. All right, now there's quite a few defined terms in this document. I'd really like to be able to see what those defined terms refer to. So I'm going to click the 3 dots here, go to Link to Defined Terms, Exhibits, etc., and enable auto linking. And see, LiquidText green underlines all of my defined terms. So if I say, what is an equity holder? I can simply click it. It brings up the definition. And one of the nice things about this is I can also click to bring up the sub-definitions within that. Now, let's say this definition of equity holder is quite important. I want to keep an eye on this as I go through the rest of the document. I can simply drag it right over here into my workspace, just like that. See? So it makes it really easy to gather your definitions and keep an eye on them as you go. So I want to share this with my associate who's going to do some additional research and talk to the other side about making the needed changes. So I'm going to click on the Share button. Now, the most powerful sharing option is the first one. Here, I can invite my colleagues directly into this LiquidText project, and we can work on it together, even in real time. But in this case, I'm going to do something a little simpler. I'm just going to do a PDF export. Click PDF file, and here I can select whether or not I want to include the workspace, as well as a variety of options for what types of annotations to include. And when I'm ready, just go to Export, and we can open this up in Adobe. And you'll see here on the first page, we have the workspace, just like we selected. And as we go on, we have the document with all of the highlights, comments, and annotations that we created. Now, we can't replicate all of the LiquidText magic in this exported PDF, right? But we can replicate some of it. So for example, we don't have ink links in the exported PDF, but if I click on this comment, it will take me back to the original page that that comment refers to. Okay, so now let's head back to LiquidText over here. All right, and that's the end of the first part of the tutorial. So notice up to now we've been using LiquidText with just one document at a time, but a lot of the power of the product comes when you work with multiple documents together. So let's talk about that. First, I'm going to go back to the home screen here. And now let's learn how we create a project with multiple documents. So obviously you can go to any of these different content sources here and simply select multiple documents to bring them in together. Or I can bring up the Apple Files browser here. I'll go to Select, and let's say I select 2 documents. Now I'll just drag both of these into LiquidText. And it'll ask me, do I want to import these as one big project or 2 separate projects? I want to import them together as one big project. You see, and there we are. Now in the documents list, we have both documents. If I want to add more documents, I can always just click the Add Document button and select the file source I want, including from iManage, of course. But if I have my file browser window open from iOS, I can also just say take a file, drag it right in on top of the document, and there we are. It imports that as well. Now in this case, I've just been dragging in individual files, but instead I could be dragging in whole folders with subfolders and thousands of subfolders and documents and so on, and it would bring that whole thing in and even recreate the file structure over here in the documents list. Okay, so now I've shown you how you can create a project with multiple documents and how you can add additional documents to an existing project. Now let's go over to a project I've already put together here that has a few documents in it, the McCaffrey stem cell case. So we'll just open this up. And you'll see over here in the documents list, we already have like 8 or 9 documents. I've organized them into little folders and everything. I can expand and shrink the folders. Again, obviously, this is a really small project. In real life, you could have many, many thousands here. We have tools for filtering and sorting them as you need. But again, we're going to keep it simple for this demo. So now for this part of the tutorial, we're going to talk about working with multiple documents together, and we're going to use more of a litigation-oriented scenario. So let's say I have a client who had a medical procedure. It didn't work out. She ended up with inflammation. Now she is suing the surgeon, and the surgeon says she just was not a good candidate, and he warned her of that. So again, we're suing the surgeon. Surgeon says our client was just a poor candidate, and he warned her of that. So the first question is, was she actually a good candidate? Well, to find out, I'm going to start by making a little title heading here. And we'll say, was she a good candidate? To find out, we'll go over to our documents list here. We'll go to this article by a medical agency and take a read through. And what do we see? We see it says most people are good candidates for this procedure. So in a typical PDF reader, I would highlight this. From what I showed you before, you might think we'll tag it, but I'm going to go a step beyond that. I'm going to drag it out into the workspace and connect it to my title heading. And so you see what I've done. I've mixed bits of my own thoughts with bits of the original text directly. Now you'll recall that comments had this little white arrow here to get to the source, and you see now excerpts have that same white arrow, and it works the same way. Whatever page I'm on, I can always just click the arrow and instantly get right back to the source. So I'm never more than one tap away from the context of my notes. All right, now if you happen to be working with more of a pen-based context, you also can do this just by circling content that you're interested in, and you'll see there's that little compass rose over there. Just drag from the compass rose, and you can pull that content directly out into the workspace as well. But in this case, I don't need that one, so I'll just delete it. So over here, it mentions that there's a figure a few pages down with a little bit more information on who's a good candidate for this procedure. I'd like to compare this text to the figure, and of course, you know how we do that. I can just squeeze the document together to bring the text and the figure up at the same time. Now, it looks like this figure is going to be helpful, so I'm just going to select it, just like I would text, and bring that right out. And we'll just shrink that down a little bit and attach it. And so you see, now I'm starting to mix text, images, title, headings, building kind of the backbone of my argument here in the workspace. All right, so let's find out if our client really is a good candidate for this. We'll go back to our documents list and go to her patient medical record. And what do we see? Well, I see that she has diabetes, hypertension, and arthritis. So if we go through the little algorithm here, we see that she is squarely in the closely monitored category, closely monitored. Well, I know I'm going to need to make a note about that because I know it's going to come up during the trial. So I'll click text box, and I'll make a little note and say she is in monitor. All right. But I need to do more than note it. I need to justify it, right? What's the factual basis for this claim? But the factual basis is over here in our medical record. How do I cross that bridge? Well, we saw it just a few minutes ago. I just draw a line from the document right into my notes using my mouse or my pen. And just as you would expect, it created one of those ink links. Now, what you didn't see before is that this even works across documents. Even if I'm in a totally different document, I can click this link for a moment, and instantly it brings me right back to what it refers to. So I'm never more than one tap away from the factual basis of my claims. Attorneys tell us that this feature, even on its own, provides them a material advantage in the courtroom, particularly compared to the folks using paper, because you can just find things so much faster this way. All right, so now we know what category our client is in. Why'd the procedure fail? Well, I've taken some preliminary notes over here, but let's go back to our documents list and go to the surgeon's deposition transcript. All right, now my associate went through and made a bunch of highlights. I'd like to see an overview of them, and you know how we can do that, of course. We go over to HighlightView, squeeze, and all our highlights come together, right? I can zoom in where I want more context, zoom out to get back to that overview. Unfortunately, though, in this case, I don't see any obvious signs that the surgeon made a mistake, but maybe the surgeon isn't telling us everything. Let's go take a look at the lead nurse's deposition transcript as well. So we'll bring that out here. And look what I did. I'm just dragging her transcript out, and I can bring it either to the side or above or below. I'm going to put it below, and it brings up her transcript in parallel with the surgeon's transcript. If I want, I can click this little down arrow here, switch orientation, and have them arranged horizontally side by side. I prefer that on my large desktop machines, but on my small iPad, I prefer it arranged vertically. All right. So now as I read through this, I see something that is pretty interesting. That the surgeon claims this procedure took 15 minutes, but the nurse says, no, it actually only took 10 minutes. That's a big discrepancy. I'd like to capture that discrepancy. How can I do that? Well, in LiquidText, it's easy. You saw how we can use ink links to connect our documents to our notes and one page of a document to another, but I can also use it to connect two different documents. So I'll write a little note for myself here, conflict, to remind me what this is about, and then I'll just draw an ink link from the one document into the other. And look at that. I've now connected two independent documents with an ink link. And so what this means is later on, I'm in court, I'm in a hearing, opposing counsel says the procedure took 15 minutes. I don't have to remember where I saw that it didn't. The information I need is immediately available right where and when I need it. No, it took 10 minutes. Okay, so now let's take out this point about the 15 minutes and bring this out into the workspace here. And we'll take this point about the 10 minutes as well and bring that out into the workspace at the same time. And so as you would imagine, since these are both excerpts with those little white arrows, I can always click one or even both to bring up the original source documents directly. Okay, so at this point, I have a pretty good working hypothesis of why the procedure failed. I think the surgeon made a timing error, but do we have any evidence that a timing error would cause it to fail? Well, to find out, let's go to the phase 3 clinical trials for this procedure. So first, let me close out that second document, go to the phase 3 clinical trials, and I'm just going to drag the little divider here to have a little bit more room for the document. Now, there's a lot of information here, but I'm just wondering, did anyone in the trials have inflammation the way our client did? So I do a quick search, inflammation. And there we are. I found 5 results. And you know how this works, of course. I just squeeze to bring all the results together. Again, on the touch screen, I pinch the screen. On my traditional mouse and keyboard device, I hold Shift while scrolling the mouse wheel. Okay, well, let's take a look at this one, see if there's anything here. No, that one's not too useful. Let's take a look at this one, the next one. Ah, yes. With the extra context, I can see this one is going to be very useful. There was someone with the same problem as our client because the surgeon made a timing mistake in that case too. So this makes a really strong circumstantial case that the same thing happened with our client. I'm going to take this, pull it out into the workspace, connect it to my other notes. I'll also color it red, and the source becomes red as well. Now I'm ready to get out of search mode here, so we'll just click the X. And now I'm ready to write up my conclusion. I want a little bit more room for the workspace, so I'll just take the little divider here and drag it to make a little bit more room. Now, I'll write up our glorious conclusion. Surgeon made a timing error. Obviously, you could write a lot more here, but I'm keeping it simple for the demo. Now, since this conclusion is based on these excerpts I pulled out, I'd like to show that. So make sure you're in pen mode again, of course, and I'm just going to draw lines connecting my excerpts together and my notes. And look at that. Now it's created a simple mind map here in my workspace. Now I'd like to share this with the court. The court does not want my mind map, it wants my Word file. So I can go to Share, and you see we have another option here, Notes Outline. Notes Outline takes all of my notes, highlights, comments, and organizes them into a nice linear document that I can send over to Microsoft Word in one click. There we are. Now I can put it into the final format that it needs to be and send it off to the court. All right. Now we're done with the tutorial. Just a couple last points I want to mention. On the top bar here, of course, you have undo and redo. Those are really important to know about. You also have help. In help, you have tabs for all of the major feature areas of the product and little video demos for all of the major features, right? So you can watch these and learn about LiquidText right within the app itself. If you have questions, under the Basics tab, there's a nice option here to contact us, and our support team will be happy to help you out. The last thing I'll mention is this is a very simple project, so I just put all of the material directly into the workspace itself. But in a larger, more complex project, I might want to have multiple workspaces. You can do that by clicking the Workspaces button right here. You see, we only have one, but I can add another workspace. And again, this workspace is part of the same project. I'll set it to be college ruled in yellow, so the look is a little different. And I can just go to one of my documents and, of course, pull out excerpts into it, just like I can in the other workspace, right? So you could have, for example, different workspaces for different phases of a trial. You could have different workspaces for different parties relative to an agreement, whatever it is that you need. Okay, that's the end of the tutorial for now. Thank you so much for watching. We're here if you need any help from us. Take care.